What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. New video. The other day, last week, I did a story and I talked about one of the most scandalous moves, right? Dudes having guys bring out a piece and then they give it to somebody and that person winds up using that piece on the person that brought it out, right? And in that video, I talked about a guy by the name of T. T wound up in a situation between him and Dylan, and T finally figuring out he needed to move on Dylan because things were going to wind up all bad for him, and he did so. And the way it was supposed to go was T was going to move on Dylan. He was supposed to hand the knife off to his homeboy, and his homeboy was going to whack him with it. However, when T moved on Dylan, he whacked him and he hit him good. I give him that. He hit him good. And then he spun around and he threw the piece. He wound up getting busted for that and going to Ad Sag. Now, a lot of people were asking me questions about T. What happened to him? Some people were saying he seemed like he was very smart. And I told you guys I would do another story, another video on T. Tell you what wound up happening with them. So, as I said, T wound up getting busted for that hit. And he went back to Ad Sag. And people wanted to know, did he get put in the hat? No. The way it was viewed was, it's a dead issue. He handled his business. There's no way of proving that he stole the stuff. So it's a dead issue, and it's not going to be something that is going to be sent to Ad Sag and become a problem for them to have to deal with. They just let it go, right? I was in 5 building Ad Sag at the time when T got back there, and he was in 6 building. Okay. This is back when they had the llavero system, and kind of surprisingly, there was a legend there in 6 building, and he decided that T was going to have the llaves, and then he left. That legend went back up to the bay and left T in charge, right? So, we're all back there. Like I said, he's in 6 building. I'm in 5 building. And I get the chain. I catch my transfer. I'm going up to the bay, right? And T winds up in the cage with me. They used to do this thing, man, back then where they used to put, a lot of times, they would put the Southerners in the cages up front. They're tiny little cages, and you're in there, cramped in there. Hopefully there's not a homie that's fat, because then you're really going to be up against the cage, and he's up against the window, or vice versa, right? Well, they put me and T in the same cage. They put a guy in front of us who had an issue coming. And I've actually told this story, right? So I'm not going to get all into that story. But on that bus ride, because I was part of the leadership in 5, he was in 6, and I knew his stuff. He was like, "Hey, Holmes, how about we just sell up there?" I said, that's fine. And for those of you guys that remember, because somebody recently asked me about this or reminded me of it, right? Keep in mind, T was probably 8 to 10 years older than me. I want to say closer to 10 years older than me, right? Actually, no. It might have been more. Minimum 10, right? And when we got to the bay, we're in the little tanks waiting. We get stripped out, all the usual, right? And we get escorted to C1. Back then, C1 was orientation. You'd be there about a week, 10 days, and then you'd see committee, and then they would send you off to one of the other blocks, right? So we get there, and the cops take our handcuffs off and walk out. And T puts his hands on his hips, right? And he's like this. Wow. Pelican Bay. I was like, man, shut the fuck up. You know how stupid that sounded right now? So that was our first night in Pelican Bay. Shoo, right? Well, we wind up moving after committee. We go from C1 to C4. And as I said in the last video, T was one of those people who was very, very, very easy to dislike. Extremely arrogant. He had a certain way of speaking that was annoying. I don't want to get into it, but he had if you ever saw that skit on In Living Color, the convict who would always use the biggest words, that was T. And I remember my neighbors. One was from Baker's, the other one was from Pomona, right? And we would interact with them, more than everyone else. We interacted with everybody, as you can, talking on the tier, playing chess, whatever it is. But that cell next door to our left, they were at the yard door, the last cell. We would interact with them the most, right? And one of them had been in the hole since '83, right? And he had to call T to the vent one day. And he told him, hey, I don't know why you talk with those words and try to act like you're better than people with just your words, eh? But I'm going to give you some advice. You do that shit to the wrong person, Holmes. You're not even going to realize the enemy that you made. One day, he really thought that he thought he was so much smarter than anyone else. And that people didn't understand the words he was using. It was the weirdest shit ever. I remember one day those guys in the vent, he was like giggling, like, haha, you know what you are? And the homie was like, what, homie? What am I? And I'm not gonna say the whole word, YouTube doesn't like it, but a PDF file is what he called him. I was laying on my bunk. So where you lay, the vent is going to be right here, right? And I'm laying there, and when he said that word to that individual in the vent, I was reading my book, and when he said, I put my book down and was just like, hey, Holmes, when I tell you that you could hear a pin drop in that pod, the whole pod can hear everything. And the homie was like, hey, what the fuck did you just say? And I remember he looked at me like, why is he tripping? And I was like, I told him real low, I said, what the fuck were you thinking, man? And then he was like, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't think you knew what the word meant. And it's like, homie, what the fuck? Everybody knows what that fucking word means. And so for those of you that got the impression that he was smart, he wasn't. He was very arrogant. And he and I wound up getting into some words one day. He was trying to act like he was really about it and all the work he's put in. And I knew of all the incidents he had been involved in. When he first hit prison, I don't know how he wound up there, but he was sent to Vacaville. You can't hang out in Vacaville if you're a Southerner. And so he got off. He went to, I believe it was Corcoran Shoe. And then when he got out of Corcoran Shoe is when he wound up in New Folsom. And he went to C facility. There was a curfew back then. Couldn't be there. So he got off. Then he winds up on B facility. He, as you guys know from the last video, he winds up whacking Dylan, right? Now, in the Bay, for one, you're not supposed to be putting your hands on each other, period, right? And especially in the shoe. Pelican Bay shoe belonged to the Legends. We were a guest there in their home. You don't disrespect them whatsoever. You don't cause headaches for them, right? But the mouth and the arrogance on this dude, I knew there was somebody there that if I get into it with this dude, I'm going to be all right. I'm going to have cover, right? Whatever with him. Remember, he whacked Dylan and they decided to just let it go. But if we would have got into it, and back then I was a knucklehead, I knew not only will I get cleared, but it may just become where, you know what, this dude's a fucking headache, right? So one day when he was doing something arrogant or whatever it was, and he was talking about all the work he put in, right? And I started laughing at him. And he said, "What's so funny?" I said, "Check this out, Holmes. We're both here for shoot terms, right? For getting off, right?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I caught a shoe on B yard. You were there, right? You were out there on the yard that day, right?" He said, "Yeah." Now, my first shoe term that I caught was a melee with another faction that happened on the upper basketball court. I wasn't on the basketball court. Me and one of the camaradas that I was cool with ran all the way to the basketball court. It got involved. I wound up getting shot at by Fight Block because I wouldn't stop. I never stopped. Until everything was done, I didn't stop. Then in Ad Seg, I picked up another shoot term, which became the controlling shoot term because it was later, right? And in both incidents, I wanted to do those things. So I was reminding him, we're both in the shoe. One of us did something that we wanted to. The other one of us did something because they had to. And I told him, don't think that because you're older than me, that you're wiser than me. Remember who I was kicking it with out there in the yard. I know everything. I said, when you went to Vacaville, you got off because you fucking had to. When you went to C facility, you got off because you fucking had to. And that thing you did with Dylan, if you didn't do it, you were going to get whacked and you know it. I said, so don't ever talk to me about putting in work when you've never done anything from your heart. Every time you've done something, it's because you had to. So I tell this story because when people talk about putting in work, there's people that put in work. Like I said, T, that was 3 things he did. Great job on paper. Great job. You're putting in work, Holmes. But what have you done from your heart? Nothing. It was self-preservation. I don't blame him. That's what prison is. But sometimes when you hear people talk about doing stuff, you may not have the full story. You might not know the whole thing. And they did something because they had to, not because they wanted to. And in that world, that's a big difference. So I don't want to make this video too long. I just wanted to give you another story of T. That's my video for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Everybody, please be safe, be smart, and tell the ones you love that you love them. I'm out of here.
Yeah. I'm speaking truth from the cell to the streets. Did 24 years, now I'm finally free. 8 strong standing, no chains on me. Ex-con, ex-gang, but my soul found peace. Taught by the struggle, pain made me wise. I seen homies fall, seen mothers cry. Now I'm here to teach what the system denies. From the darkness I rose, Tupac in my eyes. This channel ain't clout, it's the scars I show. Life lessons in these rhymes so the young ones know. Dubs on the mic, watch the wisdom grow. If you walk through